All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are back again and we're diving straight into Ayub Kus. I want to let you know that it was Brad who gave his statement first. It was then Ayub who then gave his statement, and then Lucy gave her side of the story. Now, Lucy's statement, ladies and gentlemen, tells us all we need to know. I would suggest you go back and listen to that video. Listen to every ounce of that video and then get yourself back here so we can get through this statement. And then you'll understand how this all connects. And when I say how this all connects, we're talking about how Lucy and Ayub's story connect. Then go and listen to Brad's statement from the inquest. His statement's the only one that more or less starts to connect after Jay apparently leaves this Airbnb. That's the only time his story starts to make a bit of sense. And the reason for why I believe it starts to make a little bit of sense at that point for Brad is because in his head, his focus is to ensure that not only he keeps Ayub out of trouble, but he corroborates exactly what Brandon told him to say. As we know, ladies and gentlemen, what Brad says in his inquest statement is exactly what Brandon tells Mark Williams Thomas last year, June, when Jay went missing. He would have had that interview with Mark Williams Thomas, that audio interview that we heard just before the inquest a whole year later. He would have had that with Brandon on the 24th or the 25th of June. Now, if you actually go back and listen to what Brandon's saying, not only is he misdirecting Mark Williams Thomas, but he also gives Mark Williams Thomas word by word, verbatim, the information that Brad gives us at the inquest. How does Jay call both Brad and Brandon and tell them about the bed? Show them the bed, the sofa that he made for them. See, it was Brandon that first told us that, and now we've got Brad saying the same thing at the inquest a whole year later without Brandon there. So what you're telling me, Brad's just turning up to tell Brandon's side of the story? Acting as if it's his? But in saying that, Brandon had said things to Mark Williams Thomas that Lucy had mentioned a few days before to the media. So it's kind of like, hold on, how can you both be saying the same thing? Remember, we're not hearing Brandon's side to this until Mark Williams Thomas releases his documentary just before the inquest this year. So we had to wait a whole year to hear a word from Brandon. People were surprised at hearing Brandon's voice. They didn't believe it was Brandon on the phone. And you got to think about that little bit of information right there, ladies and gentlemen. How did Mark Williams Thomas not pick up on that? It's close to impossible that they would have had the same conversation with Jay and said the exact same thing. Like I told you guys before, I think it got to a point where Mark Williams Thomas knew he was being played, but realized he couldn't do anything because he had no jurisdiction. All he could do was speak to the witnesses, which were Lucy, Brandon, Ayub, Brad, which I don't believe he did speak to because he never released any audio or any statement from Brad. But that's all he could do, was just speak to them and try and understand what they're telling him. And based on what they're telling him, it didn't make any sense. And this is the reason why Mark Williams Thomas's conclusion is that Jay had to have left that Airbnb in fear. He would have had to have gone off that road in fear. If he would have walked through that ravine for 2.5 hours to fall to his death and he didn't listen to none of his friends, he must have done that out of fear. That was Mark Williams Thomas's thinking. I mean, it's logical, but that's based on the story that they gave him. That's based on him thinking these friends didn't have nothing to do with it. If you was Mark Williams Thomas, you would be scratching your head thinking, well, the only thing that would make logical sense is that someone was after him. Something must have happened, but none of these guys are telling me. And it could boil down to a potential criminal activity that they were involved in. This is the reason why it was always steering us to the criminal underworld, that there could potentially be something involved along those lines, which Mark Williams Thomas was right. He was right the whole entire time. He just never had the jurisdiction to dig deep into what he was looking at. See, if Mark Williams Thomas would have been able to look at Jay's bank account and understand what was going on with Jay's bank, if Mark Williams Thomas was able to look at the company that Jay was trying to pay, the 2 different payments that he was trying to make to this newly registered company. See, another example would be if Mark Williams Thomas knew about the message that Brandon sent to Jay asking him for the £200, then maybe, just maybe, he would have been able to ask Brandon about that message. You've also got to think how on the 25th of June is Mark Williams Thomas speaking to Brandon and he doesn't know anything about this message. He doesn't know anything about the bank declining. You know, even days after that, he still hasn't been given that information. When was that information released? Are you telling me that we had to wait all the way until the first inquest to find out that Jay's bank declined twice? We had to wait up until the first inquest, which is a whole year later, to find out that Brandon was asking Jay to get him £200 out of his account. Are you telling me we had to wait up all the way until the first inquest to be told that all of the factual information that Mark Williams Thomas was given by the friends. You're telling me we had to wait all the way until the first inquest without Mark Williams Thomas even being there for that information, which is factual information, to be deemed as a conspiracy. And we're going to throw it out and blame it on possibly content creators, perhaps. I've never seen or heard Debbie or anyone from that side of the family talk about Mark Williams Thomas or his documentary that he released just before the inquest. There's never been any mention of that. It was just kind of like it was one moment that everyone forgot about instantly. No, we don't care about what Mark Williams Thomas was doing. We don't care about what investigation Mark Williams Thomas was doing. No, 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 no. We just want to focus on these content creators because we put all the facts out there. We've put all the facts out there. And this is where I'm extremely confused. It leaves one confused. You're telling us you've put all the facts out there, but we don't even know the reason as to why Jay would have went to an Airbnb. We literally don't know why Jay went to Masca. We have no explanation. See, the thing is, the story about Jay going to Masca has changed multiple times. And when we look at Ayub's statements with an S at the end, including the one that he gave at the inquest, the part about Jay getting into a car and going to an Airbnb changes in every single statement. It changes. So at this point, we don't even have a definitive answer as to why Jay went to Masca. So I'm going to do a video breaking down Ayub's statement. You're going to get that next, ladies and gentlemen. But I want to let you know, in that statement, there's no mention of Brad asking Jay for the key. In that statement, there's no mention of Jay losing his key or giving away his key to his friend. In that statement, there's no mention of his friends leaving him. You know, there's none of that. Where did that all go? How the hell on the final day of the inquest do we have this statement that gives us none of the information that the media initially had, that was literally mentioned to us by Ayub himself? He said it out of his own mouth on his live streams. I mean, the documentary clearly had watched a number of Ayub's live streams because they added a few clips to the documentary. And you're telling me you didn't pick up on nothing that Ayub was saying in those live streams? Nothing whatsoever, including the actual story he was given at that time? What are we talking about? Even since the inquest, ladies and gentlemen, no one's come out and answered any questions. Because if this is all about truth, if this is all about putting the facts out there, why can't we have the conversation about those facts? It never made any sense to me when Mark Williams Thomas never released anything to do with Brad in regards to his documentary. There was nothing regarding Brad in that documentary. That just made no sense. Where was Brad? What was Brad doing? Why was Mark Williams Thomas not able to speak to Brad? Mark Williams Thomas was there to help the family, as he claims, and he was in direct contact with Debbie, Warren, Zach, Jay's friends. Then how the hell did he not speak to Brad? That always confused me. That's why I feel like we've been played to a degree, because if Brandon and Lucy would have spoken to Mark Williams Thomas on the 25th of June, bearing in mind Mark Williams Thomas done an update, I think it was his first update on the 26th, and that's when he told us he spent time talking with the friends. At that point, we're thinking he must have spoken to all of the friends, but no. He hadn't spoken to all of the friends because he didn't release anything to do with Brad. But if we go back to the dates of when he spoke to the friends, Brad would have been speaking to Isla around the 26th. So why didn't he speak to Mark Williams Thomas? Why do we also have Brad on social media basically saying that Mark Williams Thomas is making it look like he's doing something? I mean, that's Brad saying that. He's basically throwing Mark Williams Thomas under the bus around the same time where Chris Tenerife is trying to throw Mark Williams Thomas under the bus. But why? I mean, if Jay is genuinely missing and they need all of the help that they can get, which includes them going onto live TV, then why would they be throwing Mark Williams Thomas under bus? That right there tells me that they're trying to hide something and they don't want Mark Williams Thomas snooping because he's the only one on the ground at the time with a brain that will be able to connect these dots. And Mark Williams Thomas was connecting the dots. That's what he was doing. But for whatever reason, they wanted to get rid of Mark. They wanted to get rid of Mark so much that they never even used him whatsoever at the inquest number 1, inquest number 2. They never mentioned his documentary. They never done anything. They just disowned him. He was online months and months later telling us that he was in close contact with Debbie. He still speaks to her. And not once did she thank him. Not once did she big him up. Not once has she mentioned him. If anything, the last thing we heard about her saying anything about Mark Williams Thomas was through the media, and that was if Mark Williams Thomas has got something to say about the Jay SLATER case that he might not have revealed, then reveal it. Do you remember that? Do you remember that? Now, we didn't have Debbie tell us herself, like through a video as she has recently, asking the world to sign this petition. She never told us through no video or through anything that Mark Williams Thomas is just bullshitting. Mark Williams Thomas is just a liar. No, she allowed Dr. Adley to tell us that all of the information that Josh Forshaw told him at the inquest, which was information that was initially given to us by Mark Williams Thomas, fed to him by the friends, was deemed as fake, conspiracy. They allowed Dr. Adley to tell the world that. So that's what Dr. Adley done on inquest day number 1. Yeah, Josh Forshaw and all the actual facts that were initially planted to Mark Williams Thomas, yeah, they're all fake. They're all fake. Get out of my court. We only want facts in this court. And Duncan Smith actually made a really good point on his video the other day when he basically said there was one fact that Dr. Adley just didn't like. He didn't like, because remember, Dr. Adley said, we only want facts in this court. We only want facts in this court. Dr. Adley, the old chump that he is, he actually thought when Jay said he's off to sell this Rolex for 10 quid, he actually thought he meant 10 pounds. So when Josh has said 10,000, no, it actually means 10,000 pounds, he was like, oh my God. He couldn't take that fact, just like Duncan said. He was trying to paint that accident narrative. He was trying to make it look like whatever Jay was talking about was clearly delusional, because who's going to sell a Rolex for 10 pounds? Come on, it's fake. Or clearly it was fake. Come on, let's just chuck that information out. That's the direction that Dr. Adley wanted to take this in, until Josh kind of said to him, no. It actually does mean 10,000 pounds, bro. That put a dent in the narrative that Adley was trying to create. So he stuck it on Josh and made Josh go away and come back with evidence to prove that it actually means 10,000 pounds. Again, Duncan made another good point. The way Josh Forshaw was treated, someone we know is not Jay's friend, someone we know who can't prove they had any type of relationship or any real genuine conversation with Jay, although we know what they're saying is a fact because it was information given to Mark Williams Thomas initially. The difference in the way Josh Forshaw was treated on inquest day number 1 in comparison to how Brad, Lucy, and Aya was treated, although they all contradict each other, although they all lie and tell a different story in comparison to the initial statements that he had, that someone like Dr. Adley would have had full access to, he sucked up to them. He sucked up to them. So again, when you think about it, the way they've kind of painted it, it's like it was a script. It was like it was a game. What are we talking about? Are we playing a game, or are we actually trying to get to the truth about what happened to Jay? Because it seems like people are playing games. I know they're sofa surfing, trying to get petitions signed. The fact that we aren't getting any answers to our factual questions, it kind of just tells us, you're playing a game. They're playing with you. It's mind games. They just want to play mind games with you, man. No emails, no communication, no correspondence whatsoever from anyone over that side to say, listen, these are the answers to your questions. Now, can we put this to bed? Or even, can you just stop talking about this full stop because we've had enough? Like, in a respectful way, obviously. But there seems to be a different agenda at play, isn't there? As I said, it goes hand in hand with how the world is working right now. Digital ID, silencing under 16s on social media. It's all part of the same parcel. It's all part of the same package. It tells me that Debbie's being used and they don't want to really get to the truth. They don't want to get the answers out there. They then have to think, well, who's pulling the strings? Is it Sarah Smith? But it can't be. You know, the reason why it can't be is because Condor Productions was on this from day one. If Condor Productions was on this from, say, July, when Jay's body had been found, who put Condor Productions on? Who put them on? It only brings me back to one person who has potentially engineered it to head in this direction without doing too much. Just plant the seed and just watch it grow. And that person is Chris Tenerife. And the reason I say that, ladies and gentlemen, is because I can connect dots right now. Mark Williams Thomas told us for the very first time about misinformation. He basically told us in a video that there was a lot of misinformation being spread online. See, at that point, they don't know realistically what's misinformation and what's not, because no one is thoroughly investigating the case. But for whatever reason, Mark Williams Thomas gave us an update on the 2nd of July. The 2nd of July. He gave us this update and said this for the very first time on the 2nd of July, talking about misinformation, conspiracies, and blah, 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 blah. It could have only been the family or friends that was telling Mark Williams Thomas at that time, whatever was out there online was misinformation. Hence why he gave us that first update about misinformation and conspiracies on the 2nd of July. However, who took over the search on the 1st of July? Chris Tenerife. Not only did he take over the search on the first day of July, ladies and gentlemen, what was he doing online prior to that date? Controlling the narrative to make it look a certain way. And he was throwing Mark Williams Thomas under the bus, saying that he's creating a shitstorm, he's a fake cop, he's this, that, the other. Not only was he saying that, but he was more or less the only one at the time, ladies and gentlemen, that was talking about misinformation and conspiracies. But at the time, he was blaming it on Mark Williams Thomas, remember? And now all of a sudden, we're talking about 24 to 48 hours, we've got the family telling Mark Williams Thomas to update us about misinformation and conspiracies. 2nd of July. The time is so crucial because if you look at certain people's actions leading up to the 2nd of July, we're talking about Lucy, Brandon, Ayub, even Brad. Things that they done online were extremely questionable, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, we could be here all day going through all of the things that they did online that tell us a total different story to what they've told us at the inquest. In my opinion, there's a lot of covering up that's been done, and Chris Tenerife has more or less been the spearhead of that cover-up. Whatever payments Jay was making, whatever money Jay owed to Brandon, it was extremely important that at that point in time, that information wasn't leaked. It wasn't given out. So therefore, Chris Tenerife had to quickly nip it in the bud and claim that Mark Williams Thomas was fake. He was spreading misinformation. He's pushing out conspiracies. Don't listen to him. All you've got to do is listen to the last couple of videos that we've done on this, ladies and gentlemen, including them planting this Johnny Vegas in Francesca's audio to make it look like Mark Williams Thomas was talking shit, when really and truly the name Johnny was given to Mark Williams Thomas by Brandon. So he wasn't talking shit. But again, they were playing a game. It was about controlling the online narrative. And as long as they can control the online narrative, whatever happens on the grounds, they can control. And that's exactly what they done. That's the reason why at the end of it, it was Chris that found Jay. No, it wasn't DTR. It wasn't any of the other searchers like Dora the Explorer. It was none of them that stumbled across Jay's body or got anywhere close to where Jay actually was. So it kind of tells you a story that there was something going on over in Tenerife, ladies and gentlemen, that Chris clearly wanted to keep under the radar, whether it was for his sake, the sake of the friends, someone that he maybe works for, the hierarchy, I don't know. Chris, 100%, in my opinion, took over to ensure that the case or the investigation went into one direction, and that was one direction only, and that was finding Jay in the mountains and painting the narrative to be just an accident. Let me put myself in Jay's shoes. But ultimately, you're protecting something and you're covering up something. And then from there, to ensure that that cover-up was airtight, we have to play Debbie. We have to plant that seed. Misinformation, conspiracy. They're the reasons, the content creators, the next in line after Mark Williams Thomas that can get to the truth, they're the ones responsible for delaying the search. They're the reasons as to why Debbie got trolled so much. And that's exactly what they're doing, ladies and gentlemen. Another thing that I wanted to mention, ladies and gentlemen, is the phone call that Jay made to a Spanish number. Jay apparently made a call to a Spanish number. We wasn't given a name. It wasn't mentioned if the number was saved to the phone or anything like that, but Jay made a call to a Spanish number whilst he was at the B&B. And that call would have lasted about 33 seconds. And we know within 33 seconds, a lot can be said. But who is Jay calling? First time in Tenerife, and he's trying to call this Spanish number. See, nobody looked into the number because Dr. Adley in the inquest basically asked Ayub, I believe. I mean, we will be back to react to that full statement. I'm going to do that next. But I'm pretty sure he asked Ayub if that kind of number belonged to him. And Ayub says, yeah, I did have a Spanish number. If that is the case, how is it possible that Ayub would have used his auntie's number when booking the Airbnb? If he's got a Spanish number, even if he's got an English number, why would he use his auntie's number? And then why would there be no background checks into the number that Jay was trying to call? Oh yeah, I forgot, because this is just a missing persons case, isn't it? It's not a criminal case. You know, Debbie doesn't look at this as a criminal case. Why not though? Why not? I mean, all of this doesn't make any sense. Why someone wouldn't look at this as criminal? What Spanish number could my son be calling? Who is he calling? Let me call that number. Who picks up? Hello, my son was calling you. I really don't get it because there's so many red flags, so many unanswered questions. You can't tell me that seeing a picture of Jay just smiling in the car with Ayub, which should have been seen a whole year before, you can't tell me that was the picture that gave you closure and you decided to believe in every single word that they were telling you at that inquest. And then you thought, you know what? I'm going to blame the content creators. They're the reason as to why it's taken this long. They're the reason why it took 29 days to find Jay. Yeah, they're the reason. Let me focus on them. Again, it makes you feel like someone's hiding something, trying to protect something. What though? I really don't get this case. I don't get the thinking behind the parents of the case either. I have to be totally honest. Even though I was speaking with Warren, I just don't get the thinking behind them. There must be something that they're not telling us, something that they're just afraid to say, or, a route they're afraid to go down. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to leave it there. Make sure you hit the like button. We're going to be back with Ayub's inquest statement. We're going to be reacting to that. We've done Brad's part. We've done Lucy's part. We're now going to do Ayub's part. So you've got all 3 parts. And in your own time, you can watch them in chronological order, get a clearer understanding of their red flags, and why I believe they are lying. Got plenty of videos being uploaded, so don't go anywhere. Check out the videos that we've just uploaded over the past couple of days. Most importantly, turn those notification bells on so you don't miss out on future videos, ladies and gentlemen. And I look forward to seeing you guys on the next one.